This pond is mine now. Carol Martinez, our HOA president, jabbed her manicured finger toward my family's ranch pond like she'd just claimed it in a game of Monopoly. Then she went all out, invited 100 people to a fancy campsite bash. Right beside it, complete with champagne, fairy lights, and a 3-tiered cake that screamed over the top. One tiny hiccup. She picked the wrong pond. See, on a century-old ranch, running 50 bulls and horses. Waste has to go somewhere, and let's just say, city folks like Carol don't know how things flow out here. What happened next? Oh, it made headlines across 3 states. It was a Tuesday morning when I found the letter in my mailbox, printed on HOA letterhead, so crisp it could have doubled as a paperweight. Dear Mr. Thompson, it began, the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association requests your cooperation in sharing usage of the water feature adjacent to our property line for the beautification of our community. I read it 3 times, my jaw tightening with every word. Water feature. That was my grandfather's pond, carved out by his own hands, on land my family's held since before these cookie-cutter McMansions were even a blueprint. I was still fuming when I heard the sharp click-clack of heels crunching down my gravel driveway. There she was, Carol Martinez, HOA president, strutting toward me like she owned the whole ranch, clipboard in one hand, measuring tape in the other. Her white pantsuit so spotless it mocked the very existence of dirt. The universe was clearly having a laugh. Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you've had any confrontation with an HOA. We'll narrate your story on our channel. Though because the moment she stepped off the driveway, her designer heel found the one fresh chicken dropping my hens had left as a welcome gift, I watched her face contort as she tried to maintain her composure, scraping her shoe on my grass while pretending nothing happened. Mr. Thompson, she said, flashing teeth so white they could signal aircraft. I trust you received our letter about the community water feature. I leaned against my fence post, taking my sweet time to answer. Ma'am, that's a ranch pond, not a community pool. Been in my family longer than your HOAs existed. She laughed, the kind of laugh that said she wasn't used to hearing the word no. Oh, I think you'll find that natural resources benefit everyone. Your pond would look so much better with a fountain, some benches, maybe a gazebo, and of course, without all the rural elements. By rural elements, I knew she meant me. The pond stays as is, I said simply. It's part of a working ranch. Carol's smile tightened like a guitar string about to snap. I need to speak to your manager, she said, then caught herself. Oh wait, you don't have one. How quaint. She pulled out her measuring tape and actually started measuring the distance from my fence to the water's edge, jotting notes on her clipboard, like she was surveying her own property. You know, she said, not looking up, I grew up next to a ranch. I know all about the smells, the noise, the unpleasantness. That's why I work so hard to get where I am today, to get away from all that. There was something in her voice, a hint of old hurt, wrapped in new arrogance. But this pond, it's different, it's beautiful, wasted on. She gestured vaguely at my work boots and faded jeans. All this, I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my voice level. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to get off my property. Now she clicked her pen closed with theatrical precision. I was trying to be nice, Mr. Thompson. Bad choice, cowboy. She turned on her freshly soiled heel and marched back to her white SUV, somehow managing to make even her retreat look threatening. But Carol didn't know She just declared war on the wrong farmer. Comment. Run, Carol, if you already know she'd done messed up. See, what Carol didn't understand was that she wasn't the first person to try to push my family around. My granddad faced down developers in the 70s. My dad fought off corporate farms in the 9 South, and now it was my turn. The difference was I had something they didn't. 50 years of accumulated knowledge about every inch of this land, including some secrets that would make Carol wish she'd never set her manicured foot on my property. As her SUV disappeared down the road, I looked at my pond, my beautiful, clean pond, with its lily pads and clear water that reflected the sky like a mirror. Then I looked past the trees to where the other pond sat hidden from view, the one we didn't talk about at dinner parties, the one that served a very specific purpose on a working ranch. And for the first time in years, I smiled, thinking about that old pond. Carol wanted to play games. Well, I knew exactly which cards to deal. The HOA didn't waste any time. 3 days after Carol's visit, I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery through my bedroom window. I could see a landscaping crew setting up what looked like industrial-grade sprinkler systems along the property line. Not just any sprinklers. These were the kind golf courses use, capable of shooting water 50 feet or more. By the time I pulled on my boots and made it outside, they were already testing the system. Morning, gentlemen, I called out, keeping my tone friendly. Help you with something? The crew chief, a sunburned guy named Mike, looked uncomfortable. Just installing some irrigation for the HOA, sir, for their new landscaping project. That's when I noticed Carol's white SUV parked across the street, her silhouette visible behind the tinted windows. Those sprinklers look mighty powerful, I observed. Sure, they're pointed the right direction. Mike glanced nervously at the SUV. We're just following the work order, sir. The first test came that afternoon. I was working on the fence when the sprinklers kicked on with a mechanical or water arced high into the air, and wouldn't you know it, a sudden breeze carried the spray right onto my property. My tool shed, my truck, and half my vegetable garden got an unexpected shower. But here's the thing about karma. Sometimes it works faster than you expect. The wind shifted, and those powerful sprinklers sent a wall of water right back at the HOA's side. I heard tires squeal and looked up to see Carol's white SUV getting absolutely drenched, water streaming down her windshield as she frantically tried to escape the spray zone. I couldn't help but chuckle as she drove off her car, looking like it had just gone through the world's most aggressive car wash. But my amusement died the next morning when I walked out to check on my mother's rose garden, the heritage roses she'd planted 40 years ago. Varieties you couldn't find anymore were drowning in pools of standing water. The constant spray had flooded their bed, and several plants were already showing signs of root rot. These weren't just flowers, they were living memories, each bush planted for a special occasion. The yellow ones for my parents' anniversary, the red ones for my birth, the white ones for my grandmother's passing. Now they were dying one by one, victims of Carol's petty water war. I knelt in the mud, trying to save what I could, my hands black with soil as I dug drainage channels. That's when I found it, a piece of old paper, laminated and buried near the largest rose bush, part of a blueprint, it looked like, with my grandfather's handwriting in the margins. Tom Bradley appeared at my fence line, coffee mug in hand. At 70 years old, Tom was one of the original residents back before Meadowbrook became an HOA. He'd known my grandfather had helped him build some of the ranch structure's rough morning sun, he said, watching me work, heard about the new sprinkler system. Carol's idea, no doubt. I showed him the damaged roses and his face darkened. Your mother would be heartbroken. These roses meant everything to her. He paused, studying my face. You got that look, Liam, same look your granddad had when the county tried to force that highway through here. What are you thinking? I held up the piece of blueprint I'd found. I'm thinking Granddad might have left me more than just land and memories. Tom leaned closer, squinting at the faded lines. Is that what I think it is? Before I could answer, his expression turned serious. Boy, don't do nothing stupid, but also don't do nothing. Carol's been pushing people around 4 or 5 years now, made me cut down my apple tree because it was attracting bees. Like bees are a bad thing. I spent the rest of the day trying to salvage the roses, replanting what I could, building up BMS to redirect the water. The landscaping company had given me a quote, $3,000, to restore the heritage garden. $3,000 I didn't have for damage I didn't cause. As the sun set, I sat on my porch, that piece of blueprint in my hands. It showed part of a water system, pipes and valves, dated 1968. There was more to find, I was sure of it. My grandfather had been a meticulous man, a planner. He wouldn't have left just one piece. That night, I made a decision. Carol wanted to play water games, fine. But she'd picked the wrong pond to mess with. Comment below what state you're watching from, because what happens next might be illegal in yours. Just kidding. Or am I? The thing about old farms is they're full of secrets, drainage systems, underground pipes, connections that aren't on any modern survey. My grandfather had built this place when regulations were different, when a handshake was a contract and a man's word meant something. Tomorrow, I'd start looking for the rest of those blueprints, because something told me Granddad had prepared for this exact situation, even if he'd never imagined someone like Carol would come along that evening. Carol posted on her social media page a photo of my pond taken from her property line with the caption, "Future site of Meadowbrook Community Pool, making our neighborhood beautiful, one improvement at a time." Within an hour, the comments section had turned into a battleground. That's not yours, Karen. Someone wrote. Another added, pretty sure that's private property, but Carol's supporters quickly drowned them out with hearts and thumbs up emojis, already planning their pool parties and sunset gatherings by the water. Tom showed me the post on his phone the next morning, shaking his head. She's already claiming victory, he said, getting folks excited about something that ain't hers to give. We stood by my fence, looking out at the pond in question. The morning sun made the water sparkle like diamonds, lily pads floating serenely on the surface. A great blue heron stood motionless in the shallows, waiting for breakfast to swim by. The pond really was beautiful. I had to admit, Granddad had positioned it perfectly to catch the morning light, and the willows he'd planted along the far edge had grown into a living curtain that swayed in the slightest breeze. 3 generations of Thompson kids had learned to swim in that water, myself included. I could still remember summer afternoons when Mom would bring out lemonade and we'd spend hours floating on inner tubes, watching clouds drift by. Those were simpler times before developers started buying up the land around us, before the county started talking about progress and community. development now. Carol wanted to turn those memories into some kind of suburban water feature, complete with safety regulations and probably a lifeguard schedule. The thought made my stomach turn. "You know what you ought to do," Tom said suddenly, a glint in his eye. "Give her exactly what she deserves. Let her and her fancy friends find out what ranch life really smells like." He gestured toward the pond. "One good dose of reality from that water, and she'll be running back to her HOA meetings faster than you can say property lines." I let out a long sigh, the kind that comes from knowing something nobody else does. "Can't do it, Tom." He turned to me, eyebrows raised. "Why the hell not? It's your pond." I picked up a stick and tossed it into the water, watching the ripples spread, because that's the clean pond. Spring filtered through limestone, probably the cleanest water in the county. Tom's coffee mug stopped halfway to his mouth. "Wait, what?" I pointed past the stand of cottonwood trees toward the back of my property. "The waste pond is way over there, behind those trees. That's where all the runoff from the barn and pastures goes. This one." I gestured at the pretty pond Carol coveted. "This one's cleaner than her bottled water. The state actually tested it 5 years ago when they were doing a county-wide water quality survey. The report came back showing mineral content that would make spring water companies jealous. The limestone aquifer that fed it acted as a natural filtration system, and the pond's ecosystem was perfectly balanced. We had freshwater mussels cleaning the water, native plants oxygenating it, and a whole food chain that kept everything in harmony. The waste pond, on the other hand, was exactly what you'd expect. On a working ranch, it collected runoff from the barn, the corral, and the pastures, where 50 head of cattle and a dozen horses did their business. It was functional, necessary, and definitely not somewhere you'd want to take a swim. The smell alone, on a hot day, could peel paint, and that was when the wind was favorable. Tom stared at me like I'd just told him the earth was flat. "So you're telling me she's fighting tooth and nail for your clean pond, and you're just going to let her take it?" But even as he said it, I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. He'd known my grandfather, after all, unless he started, then stopped himself. I pulled out the piece of blueprint I'd been carrying in my pocket, smoothing it against the fence post. "Granddad was smarter than people gave him credit for. This show's part of an overflow system, connects the two ponds underground." Tom studied the faded lines, tracing them with one weathered finger. "Emergency drainage," he murmured, "in case of flooding." "Brilliant." I dropped another stick in the pond, but this time I aimed for a specific spot near the edge. We both watched as it swirled in a slow circle before being pulled towards something beneath the surface. "There's an intake valve down there," I said, "quietly sealed for 50 years, according to the date on this paper." "She made me cut down my apple tree," Tom said after a long pause. 30-year-old tree my wife planted. Said it was attracting bees, creating a nuisance. You know what she replaced it with? Nothing, just grass, useless water-wasting grass." His voice carried years of resentment. "Then she went after the Johnsons' vegetable garden, said it was bringing down property values, made them tear it all out." He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the fighter he must have been as a younger man. "If you got a way to teach her a lesson, legal-like, I won't say a word against it." As if summoned by our conversation, a courier arrived with an envelope bearing the HOA seal. Inside was an invitation on cardstock, so thick it could double as a roof shingle. "Moonlight, swear by the pond," it read in flowing script. "Join us for an evening of elegance as we celebrate our newest community amenity. The date was set for next weekend. Carol had even included a little map showing community members where to park on my access road. I studied the invitation. More closely, she'd had it professionally designed, complete with gold foil accents and a watercolor illustration of my pond. At the bottom, in tiny print, it read, "Hosted by the Meadowbrook Community Association for the benefit of all residents." Not a single mention that the pond was on private property. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. She wasn't just planning a party. She was staging a coup, trying to establish precedent for community use of my land if enough people showed up and used the pond without my permission. She could potentially argue for an easement or even adverse possession if I didn't act quickly. The legal implications made my head spin, but one thing was crystal clear: I couldn't let this stand. I looked at Tom, then at the invitation, then at the pond, where that hidden valve waited beneath the lily pads. "She's actually throwing a party," I said. "At my pond that she doesn't own." Tom snorted. "Woman's got balls, I'll give her that." I folded the invitation and tucked it into my shirt pocket. "You know what I think? I'll let her have her party." "Seems only neighborly." Tom's eyes narrowed. "You're up to something," I smiled. The first real smile I'd had since finding my mother's roses. Drowning Granddad always said this land would take care of us if we took care of it. Maybe it's time to test that theory. She's throwing a party at my pond that she doesn't own. But here's the thing about pretty ponds: they're all connected to something. Grandpa made sure of that type karma. If you think Carol's about to learn why you don't mess with farm engineering, because sometimes the best revenge isn't doing something mean, it's letting people face the natural consequences of their actions. And nature, as Carol was about to learn, doesn't care about HOA rule. 3 hours before the party, that's when everything started falling into place. I had spent the week searching through Granddad's old files, and finally, in a dusty box marked farm infrastructure, I found the complete blueprints. My hand shook slightly as I unfolded the yellowed paper, dated March 1968. There it was, drawn in Granddad's meticulous hand: the entire water management system for the ramp to ponds, connected by an 18 pipe running 30 feet. Underground emergency overflow system. The notes read, "To prevent flooding during heavy rains, test valve annually." Another note in the margin, barely legible: "Only open during rain forecast for pressure equalization." I checked my weather app. 70% chance of thunderstorms tonight. Perfect. The old valve was exactly where the blueprint indicated, hidden beneath a wooden cover grown over with grass. The wood crumbled as I pried it up, revealing a brass wheel valve that hadn't been turned in decades. Rust flaked off under my fingers as I gripped it. This wasn't about revenge, I told myself. This was about testing a 50-year-old safety system during appropriate weather condition. Completely legal, completely necessary. The fact that it coincided with Carol's party, well, that was just unfortunate timing. Meanwhile, across the property line, Carol's party preparations were in full swing. I could hear the bustle of activity, the clink of glassware being unloaded, the hollow thump of a dance floor being assembled. She'd hired a DJ, a catering company, the works through the trees. I caught glimpses of white tablecloths, twinkling lights being strung up, and a banner that read, "Nature belongs to all of us." The irony wasn't lost on me. Carol herself was live streaming the setup, her voice carrying on the evening breeze. "We're transforming this neglected eyesore into paradise." she gushed to her phone soon. This will be the crown jewel of Meadowbrook. Tiered cake arrived complete with a miniature fondant pond on top, complete with tiny lily pads and a sugar sculpture. Swan, the attention to detail was impressive. I had to admit they'd thought of everything except one small detail. They were still on my property. The first guests started arriving. As the sun touched the horizon, cars lined up along my access road. Despite the private property signs, women in cocktail dresses picked their way across my pasture in heels. Men in khakis and polo shirts carried bottles of wine. I watched from my porch as they gathered around my pond like they owned it. Champagne flutes glinting in the fairy lights. Carol stood at the center of it all, resplendent in a white designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. She was in her element, gesturing grandly as she described her vision for the space. "Picture it," she said, loud enough for me to hear. "A floating dock right there, a diving platform over there, maybe a little beach area for the children." The DJ started up, bass thumping across the pastoral landscape, sending my cattle moving nervously. To the far pasture, Tom appeared at my elbow, having walked over from his place. "Quite a show," he said. "You really going to let this play out?" I showed him the weather radar on my phone. Storm cells building to the west, right on schedule. "Granddad's notes were very specific," I said. "Test the overflow system when rain is forecast, prevents pressure damage to the pipes." Tom's grin was wolfish. "And if that test happens to coincide with certain HOA activities," I shrugged. "Natural consequences." The party was reaching its peak now. The dance floor was full. The bar was flowing, and Carol was posing for photos by the pond's edge. Someone had brought sparklers, and children were running around with them, their laughter mixing with the pulsing music. It was actually beautiful, in a twisted sort of way. All these people celebrating on land that wasn't theirs, around water. They had no right to. The first rumble of thunder was so low most people didn't notice, but I did. It was time. The valve was even more stubborn than I'd expected. 50 years of inactivity had seized it. Solid. I applied penetrating oil, let it sit, tried again. Nothing. My hands were getting raw from gripping the rusty metal. Another rumble of thunder, closer now. A few party guests glanced at the sky nervously. I grabbed a pipe wrench from my truck, fitted it over the valve wheel for extra leverage. "Come on, Granddad." I thought. "Don't fail me now." Tom materialized beside me. "Need a hand?" Together we pulled the combined weight of our effort, making the valve groan. Something deep in the mechanism gave way with a crack. "It's moving." Tom grunted, and it was slowly, protestingly, but moving. One turn, two. I heard it before I saw it. A gurgling, rumbling sound from deep underground. The pipe was open. 50 years of sediment was breaking loose, and behind it, the contents of my waste pond were beginning to flow. But we retreated to my porch to watch nature take its course. At first, nothing seemed to happen at the party. The music continued. People kept dancing. Carol kept holding court. Then a child near the pond's edge wrinkled her nose. "Mommy, something smells funny." That's when I saw it. A dark cloud spreading beneath. The lily pads like ink in water. The clear pond was changing color from the bottom up. A woman in a pink dress was the first to really notice. She had been posing for a photo at the water's edge when the smell hit her. Her shriek cut through the music like a knife. "Oh my God, what is that?" The DJ, positioned on a platform partially over the water, felt his equipment start to spark as the water composition changed. His turntables shorted out with a spectacular display of electrical crackling. The music died with a warped, grinding sound. People were backing away from the pond now, but it was too late for the ones closest to the water. The pristine surface had turned the color of chocolate milk, and the smell, oh, the smell was unmistakable. "It smells like poop," a child announced at the top of his lungs. With the brutal honesty only kids possess, the three-tiered cake positioned for the perfect photo opportunity near the water became a casualty of the stampede. Someone knocked the table in their haste to escape, and the whole confection toppled. The fondant pond on top landed with poetic justice in the actual pond, the sugar swan disappearing into the brown morass. Carol stood frozen at the epicenter of the chaos, her white dress now splattered with questionable droplets, her face a mask of horror and rage. "My Louis Vuitton," she screamed, as her designer bag, abandoned in the rush, slowly sank into the muck. "Who did this? I'll sue everyone." The live stream was still running, broadcasting the disaster to hundreds of viewers who were flooding the comments with poop emojis and laughing reactions. The party that was supposed to be Carol's triumph had turned into her most public humiliation. Sheriff Brody arrived within minutes. Someone had called 911. REPORTING, chemical warfare at the party. He surveyed the scene with the weary expression of a man who'd seen too much suburban drama. Carol rushed him immediately, mascara running down, her cheeks pointing at me with a shaking finger. "Arrest him," she shrieked. "He poisoned our water. He tried to kill us all." Brody looked at me, standing calmly on my porch, then at the pond, then back at Carol. "Ma'am, whose property is this pond on?" Carol spluttered. "That's not he." Deliberately, "This is biological terrorism." The sheriff sighed and pulled out his notepad. "I need to see property deeds, permits for this gathering, and any evidence of criminal wrongdoing, not accusations, ma'am. Evidence." The rain started then, fat drops that sent the remaining party guests scurrying for their cars. Carol stood in the downpour, her party in ruins. Her dreams of a community pool turned into a nightmare. She thought I was going to jail. She thought she had me, but Grandpa Frank taught me something. Always read the fine print. If you think I'm in trouble, comment "busted." But if you think I've got an ace up my sleeve, type "wait for it." Because the best part of this story hasn't even happened yet. The next morning dawned clear and humid, yesterday's storm having passed through, leaving everything steam-bathed and swollen. I was having my coffee on the porch when the convoy arrived, 3 septic pump trucks rolling up my driveway like some kind of sewage. Cavalry. Carol emerged from her SUV, wearing what I can only describe as a hazmat chic ensemble designer. Jeans, rubber boots that probably cost more than most people's cars, and a surgical mask bedazzled with Rin. "I'm cleaning up your mess," she announced, voice muffled by the mask. "And you're paying for every penny of it, my lawyer says. I can put a lien on your property for the cleanup costs." Behind her, the pump truck drivers looked uncomfortable, probably because they knew they were about to pump out a pond on private property without permission. I stepped down from my porch, keeping my voice calm. "That's private property. You're planning to pump, ma'am. You need my permission to access it." Carol's eyes narrowed above her sparkly mask. "Permission? You poisoned a community resource. That's environmental terrorism, my lawyer says. Damages could exceed $500,000. The lead driver, a burly man with Rex embroidered on his coveralls, shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, we discussed this. We can't pump without the owner's consent." That's theft of services, and I could lose my license. Carol whirled on him, her designer boots squatching in the still muddy ground. I'm paying you triple your normal rate. Rex shrugged apologetically. Money ain't worth losing my livelihood, ma'am. Sorry. I had to admire his integrity. Carol tried. The other two drivers, but they were equally firm. One of them, a younger guy, actually looked relieved. My dad knows Mr. Thompson. He said quietly, states, good people. I'm not crossing him for no HOA nonsense. As the trucks rumbled away, leaving deep ruts in my driveway that I'd have to fix later, Carol's composure cracked like an egg on concrete. She pulled out her phone and started recording. This is Carol Martinez, president of the Meadowbrook HOA, documenting the environmental disaster at 1427 County Road. The property owner, Liam Thompson, has refused to remediate the biological hazard he created. She panned the camera toward the pond, which I had to admit still looked pretty rough. The water had mostly cleared, but there was definitely a lingering essence, ma'am. One of the pump truck drivers interrupted. We can't actually pump without the property owner's consent. That's theft of services. Carol whirled on him. I hired you. I'm paying you. The driver shrugged. And I don't want to lose my license. Sorry. As the trucks rumbled away, Carol's composure finally cracked. You think you're so clever, she hissed at me, but I've called an emergency HOA meeting. We're voting tonight on taking legal action. You're going to lose everything, your land, your precious ponds, all of it. She wasn't bluffing about the emergency meeting. By 5 o'clock. The Meadowbrook Community Center parking lot was packed. I watched from across the street as residents filed in there. Faces ranging from amused to angry to confused. Some were still sporting traces of last night's disaster. A woman with a bandaged ankle from slipping in the mud. A man with what looked like a chemical burn from the DJ's exploding equipment. Tom had gone inside as my eyes and ears. His position as a longtime resident gave him credibility, and people trusted him. I given him copies of some key documents, just in case they became relevant. The meeting was scheduled for 2 hours, but I had a feeling it would run longer. These things always did when Carol got on her soapbox. The emergency meeting was held in the community center, a building so beige it could cure insomnia. I watched from across the street as residents filed in, their faces ranging from curious to angry to amused. Tom had gone inside as a resident. He had voting rights. He'd promised to text me updates. The first message came quickly. Carol's lawyer, here, suit and everything. This is serious. Then playing video of party disaster. Some people laughing and lawyer talking now, using big words. Environmental impact assessment, statutory damages, blah blah. I was starting to worry when the next text came through. Holy old man Henderson just stood up. Henderson was 85, had lived in the neighborhood since before it was a neighborhood. Tom's next text was a play-by-play. Henderson been here 60 years, never seen such nonsense. That pond belongs to Thompson family, period. Then Carol, trying to interrupt, Henderson told her to sit down. Crowd gasping. My phone buzzed continuously as Tom provided real-time updates. Henderson now listing every overreach. Carol's done the apple tree, Johnson's garden, widow, Baker's chalk art. Fine people are getting angry. Then someone just asked why. Carol threw party on private property, lawyer trying to spin it as community beautification. Crowd not buying it. And then the bombshell: Henderson just called for vote of no confidence. Carol screaming about bylaws. Someone brought copy. Vote is legal. This is insane. I paced my porch, wishing I could see inside the meeting was supposed to last 2 hours, but it stretched to 3, then 4. Finally, people started streaming out. I could tell immediately which side they'd taken. Carol's supporters looked shell-shocked and angry, while others were actually celebrating, shaking hands and laughing. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When people finally started filing out, I could see the divide. Carol's supporters looked shell-shocked, while others were openly celebrating. Tom made a beeline for my truck. You're not going to believe what just happened in there. He was actually bouncing on his toes with excitement. Henderson went full scorched earth, brought up every single overreach Carol's ever done. The apple tree, the Johnson's garden, the time she tried to find the widow baker for her grandkids' chalk drawings. Then he called for a vote of no confidence. My heart skipped, and Tom's grin could have powered the streetlights. 47-12. But Carol's not going down easy. She announced she's proceeding with the lawsuit regardless, says she's got environmental law on her side. As if on cue, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Mr. Thompson, this is Patricia Wells from Channel 7 News. We understand there was an incident at a party on your property. Would you care to comment? By the next morning, the story had gone. Regional ranch owner accused of poisoning pond ran across the morning news with Carol's live stream footage playing behind the anchor. She'd given an interview standing at my front gate, my locked front gate, playing the victim to perfection. We just wanted to beautify our community, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue to make something nice for our children, and he destroyed it out of spite and hatred. The comments online were brutal but divided. Some called me a hero, standing up to HOA tyranny. Others said I'd gone too far and endangered public health. Legal experts weighed in, arguing about property rights versus environmental protection. The whole thing had spiraled far beyond a neighborhood dispute. By evening, the story had gone. Regional ranch owner accused of poisoning pond ran the headline with Carol's live stream footage playing on repeat. She'd given an interview in front of my gate, playing up the victim angle. We just wanted to beautify our community, she said, dabbing at her eyes, and he destroyed it out of spite. The comment section was brutal but divided, some calling me a hero, others saying I'd gone too far. But the real blow came the next morning when Sheriff Brody showed up with official papers, cease and desist order. He said, apologetically, can't use any water from either pond until the environmental assessment is complete. Judge's orders. Carol had found a judge sympathetic to her cause, probably one who lived in a similar HOA paradise without water access. I couldn't run the ranch properly. My cattle needed water. The gardens needed irrigation. She was trying to strangle me out. How long? I asked. Brody shrugged. Could be weeks, maybe months. The cease and desist order was a masterstroke. I had to admit, without water access, I'd have to truck in water for the cattle at enormous expense, or move them to leased pasture. The heritage roses would die without irrigation. The vegetable garden would wither. Carol had found my weakness and was squeezing hard. I spent the morning on the phone with my bank, trying to figure out how long I could last. The numbers weren't encouraging. A month, maybe 2. If I sold some cattle after that, I'd have to consider Carol's original offer to share the pond, which we all knew meant surrender it entirely. She'd played the long game and was winning. Tom found me that afternoon, staring at the ponds, trying to figure out my next move. You need help, son, he said, simply the kind that wears a suit and knows which fork to use at fancy dinners. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts to a number I'd never used, but always kept. My granddad had given it to me years ago, made me promise to memorize it. If you ever get in real trouble, he'd said, call this number. The phone rang 3 times before a growly voice answered. Andy, Mr. Abernathy, this is Liam Thompson, Frank's grandson. There was a pause. Well, been wondering when I'd hear from you. Your granddad said you might need me someday. What's the trouble? I gave him the short version. When I finished, he chuckled, actually chuckled. Environmental terrorism over a pond overflow. That's creative. Tell me, does the 1968 infrastructure plan still exist? Yes, sir, I have it right here. Then I'll see you tomorrow. And Liam, tell the HOA president she might want to hire better lawyers. Abernathy, that name makes every lawyer within 500 meters nervous. This 82-year-old man once bankrupted a whole corporation with one piece of paper, and now he's driving. Here, comment your age if you think old people are the most dangerous people to mess with, because Carol was about to learn why experience beats enthusiasm every single time. The law offices of Brennan Cole and Associates occupied the top floor of the newest building in town, all glass and chrome and intimidation. Carol had assembled her legal dream team. 3 lawyers in suits that probably cost more than my truck, plus a stenographer and what looked like an environmental consultant. She sat at the center of her entourage like a general preparing for war, live streaming. Again, because apparently she hadn't learned her lesson about documenting things. We're about to get justice for our community, she told her phone. Environmental crimes cannot go unpunished. Her lead attorney, a sharp-faced man named Brennan, had already spread out an impressive array of documents on the conference table. Photos from the party water quality reports, property surveys, and what appeared to be a damage assessment, putting the total at just over $500,000. They looked confident. They looked prepared. They looked like they'd already won. Then Henderson Abernathy walked in, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 at 82. Abernathy moved like a man who'd never rushed for anyone or anything. His suit was 20 years out of style and fit him perfectly. His briefcase was leather, so worn it looked soft as butter. But his eyes were sharp as surgical instruments. Gentlemen, he nodded to the other lawyers. Ms. Martinez. He settled into his chair with deliberate calm. Shall we begin? Brennan launched into his opening statement with the confidence of a prosecutor in a slam-dunk case. The facts are simple, he declared. Mr. Thompson deliberately contaminated a water source during a community gathering, causing immediate environmental damage and potential long-term health risks to dozens of residents. We have video evidence, witness testimony, and water quality reports showing dangerous levels of biological contamination. He slapped a folder on the table. This is criminal negligence at best, environmental terrorism at worst. Abernathy listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad with a fountain pen. When Brennan finally wound down, Abernathy looked up. Fascinating theory. Counselor, tell me, have you reviewed the county planning documents for this property? Brennan frowned. The current zoning clearly shows. I said, county planning documents. Abernathy interrupted gently, not current zoning, the original infrastructure plans from when the water management system was installed. He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a rolled document protected in a clear tube. March 15, 1968, County Ordinance 681422. The The room was silent as he unrolled the blueprint, the same one I'd found, but in pristine condition. This is the approved water management plan for the Thompson Ranch, filed with the county and signed by, he adjusted his reading glasses, the county commissioner, the water board director, and, interestingly enough, myself, as assistant county attorney. Carol's team leaned forward to examine the document. I could see Brennan's confidence wavering. Even if this document is legitimate, it doesn't give Mr. Thompson the right to. Abernathy raised one finger. Please observe Section 4, subsection C, Emergency Overflow System, to be installed connecting retention pond A to drainage pond B. Purpose: flood prevention and pressure equalization during heavy rain events. Testing required during appropriate weather conditions. He looked up. Tell me, Mr. Brennan, what was the weather forecast for the night in question? One of the junior lawyers quickly pulled up historical weather data on his tablet. 70% chance of thunderstorms. Severe weather warning issued for the county. So Mr. Thompson was testing a required safety system during exactly the conditions specified in the county ordinance. Abernathy amused. How fascinating that this routine maintenance happened to coincide with an unpermitted gathering on his private property. Carol couldn't contain herself any longer. Unpermitted? We don't need permits for community events. Abernathy turned to her slowly. On your property, no, but this pond is on Mr. Thompson's property, is it not? We're beautifying it, making it accessible to everyone. Carol's voice was rising. It's a natural resource, actually. Abernathy pulled out another document. According to the original deed, filed in 1893, the pond is specifically described as stock water. For agricultural use, there's no easement for public access, no shared use agreement, nothing that would give anyone besides the property owner any rights to it whatsoever. Brennan tried to rally. Regardless of property rights, Mr. Thompson's actions resulted in environmental contamination of his own pond. Abernathy interrupted. Again, on his own property, where, I should note, your clients were trespassing. He pulled out a series of photographs. These were taken by Mr. Bradley the night of the incident. Notice the no trespassing signs, clearly visible, the private property markers, the locked gate that someone cut open. The environmental consultant cleared his throat. The contamination levels we documented. Abernathy slid another report across the table. Water quality test from this morning. The pond has returned to its baseline state. Turns out the contamination was simply organic matter from a working agricultural operation, completely legal under right to farm statutes. He smiled pleasantly. Unless you're suggesting that cattle operations are illegal in agricultural zones. The room was dead silent. Carol's lawyer team exchanged glances like poker players, realizing they'd been bluffed. Finally, Brennan spoke carefully. What are you proposing? Mr. Abernathy, the old lawyer, leaned back. Your clients publicly apologize for trespassing, pay for the damage to Mr. Thompson's property, including the destroyed heritage roses and cut fence, and we all walk away. Otherwise, I'll be filing charges for criminal trespass, vandalism, harassment, and he smiled, defamation based on Ms. Martinez's numerous social media posts. Carol shot to her feet. This is blackmail. You can't. She reached for the blueprint, trying to grab it off the table. Sheriff Brody, who'd been silently observing from the corner, stepped forward. Ma'am, hands off the historical document. That's evidence. Carol's face had turned an alarming shade of red. I won't let this happen. I've worked too hard to get away from. She stopped abruptly. Realizing what she was about to say, But it was too late. In that moment her mask slipped, and everyone saw what was underneath, not a crusader for community beautification, but someone running from a past she despised, trying to control everything around her to avoid feeling powerless again, to get away from what Carol? Tom asked quietly from his seat in the corner. From the smell of cow, from people like us? Carol's composure shattered completely. Yes. She screamed yes, from all of it, from being poor, from being nobody, from having to smell that stench every day of my childhood. I earned better. I deserve better. The silence that followed was deafening, even her own lawyers looked uncomfortable. Finally, Brennan cleared his throat. We need to confer with our client. Perhaps we should table this discussion. But Abernathy wasn't done. One more thing. I've been contacted by 47 residents of the Meadowbrook HOA. They've asked me to inform you that there will be a special vote next Tuesday. A vote of no confidence in the current HOA president. He looked directly at Carol. I believe you're familiar with the bylaws regarding removal of board members. Carol's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling around her, and everyone could see it. Her lawyers were already packing their briefcases, recognizing a lost cause. The environmental consultant was edging toward the door. Even the stenographer had stopped typing. We withdraw all claims, Brennan said formally. We'll have the dismissal paperwork filed by end of business today. As people filed out, Carol remained seated, staring at the table. For a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered my mother's roses, drowning in her manufactured flood, and the sympathy evaporated. Tom paused by her chair. You know, Carol, that apple tree you made me cut down, my wife planted it the year before she died. It was the last thing she ever put in the ground. Carol didn't respond, didn't even look up. Her empire of control had collapsed, and she knew it. Outside, Abernathy shook my hand with a grip still firm. Despite his age, your grandfather would be proud. He said he always knew this day might come. That's why he made sure everything was documented, filed, and legal. He was protecting not just his land, but his family's future. The special HOA meeting the following Tuesday was standing room. Only Carol didn't attend. Rumor had it she'd already listed her house. The vote was unanimous, 47-0. With 12 abstentions, Tom Bradley was elected interim president by acclamation. His first act was to void all pending property disputes. His second was to institute a good neighbor policy, emphasizing cooperation over control. 1 month later, my pond was crystal clear, again reflecting the sky like nature's own mirror. The lily pads had returned, and the great blue heron was back to his morning fishing. More importantly, my mother's heritage roses had not only recovered, but were blooming more magnificently than ever. Turns out a little organic fertilizer, properly diluted and applied, works wonders for roses. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Hey Liam, need advice on rose fertilizer. Mine are looking a bit peaked. I smiled, looking out at the two ponds, both serving their intended purposes, both exactly where they belonged. I typed back, well Tom, I hear the organic kind from bulls and horses works great, but you got to dilute it properly. Stop by tomorrow and I'll show you the proper ratios. Bring coffee. The SUV was gone from across the street. A for sale sign in the yardward was Carol had moved 3 counties over to a nice new development with an even stricter HOA. I wondered how long before she tried to control something that couldn't be controlled, but that wasn't my problem anymore. My grandfather's voice echoed in my memory. Good fences make good neighbors, but good lawyers make better ones. He'd been right about that, just like he'd been right about the infrastructure plan, the documentation, and the importance of keeping good records. But most of all, he'd been right about the land itself. Take care of it, and it'll take care of you, even if that means occasionally reminding people that pretty ponds and working farms don't always mix well. Got a crazy HOA story of your own? Drop it in the comments below. And remember, always read the fine print, document everything, and never underestimate the power of a well-timed natural consequence. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't doing something mean, it's just letting nature take its course. If this video made you say, "No way, that's real,"